tell you the story, but I don't know what it's about really. And it took me a long time. One day, like after about 3 or 4 weeks, after all the interviews were over, I realized what it was about. And I went, and I could tell them. I should call all those interviewers back and tell them. And the same thing is when you do a tour talk. This is Easy Rollins. I know everybody thought Easy was dead. Maybe I thought he was dead. And I knew he was the last one to say anything in Blind Faith. So he wasn't dead then. But he could have died later. But I stopped writing Easy Rollins because I felt that I was just going to start getting stale. The books would start repeating themselves. It's like there's some people who write genre for a long time. They write one after another. Like when you read the Make Great series, the first 20 books are great. The last 60, they're okay. but there's something kind of expected in the mind of the writer, and I didn't want to feel that. So, this is a mystery, though. But I'm going to read you the first two chapters, and the first two chapters don't have anything to do with the mystery, So, as Mr. Johnson said, there's a murder at some point, but Easy thought he was dead, and he wakes up thinking he's dead, and it's very important, I think, for me to explain or to read the two chapters in which he begins to come back to himself. I want to say also that in most of the books I've written, fiction, the theme of redemption, is returning. It's not unusual in people's writing. I mean, that doesn't make me unique. This book, however, rather than being a book about redemption, is actually a book about resurrection, which is, it's like the difference between a simile and a metaphor. A simile, you're like something, and a metaphor, you are that thing. He's a bear. That's a metaphor. And he's not a human being. He's a bear. This is not, trying to, redeem your life. This is actually trying to reclaim your life. So what I'll do is I'm going to read the first two chapters, not very long, and then you will ask me questions, and I will answer those questions. And that'll be that. And maybe somebody will buy a book. That'll be nice. My publisher will feel that they didn't waste their money sending me here. I came half awake, dead and dreaming. My eyes were open, but I couldn't focus on anything because I was still falling, as if the nightmare had followed me from sleep into the waking world. I didn't know where I was or where I'd come from, but the bed under me was turning and falling, and I was sure, had perished. This sensation was so real, so palpable, that I closed my eyes and moaned. The movement of the bed then took on a temporal quality. Instead of falling, I had become unmoored in time, traveling backward and then forward through a life that was mine and yet at the same time foreign to me. I watched my mother dying in the bedroom of our shanty house in New Iberia, Louisiana. She was laid up in a big feather bed, a big woman who was trying to catch her breath but couldn't inhale right. It sounded like she was drowning. She was so pretty, I thought. I had once loved her, but could no longer raise this feeling in my heart. I might have even smiled as she shuddered under the labor of simple breathing. Then I tumbled into a boxcar peopled by brooding and silent black men. They stared at the boy, and he saw from their point of view a scared 8-year-old orphan child looking for companionship in those angry, bloodshot eyes. I was no longer that kid, but had become those men who couldn't care about another defenseless orphan child, destined probably to die. I saw myself and wondered almost idly if that young son would live to the end of the line. I was surprised to see that he had made it to 5th Ward, Houston, Texas, stealing oranges, skulking in back alley corners, asking everyone he met if they knew a name, Martin. My grandfather, he said. He'd learned to speak up and stand straight. He already carried scars that would follow him through life, but he found his grandfather, a hard man who allowed him to sleep on the outside front porch at night. Time picked up speed after that. In an instant, the boy, Ezekiel, was a young man, a fool who signed up for the army, for the war. He passed through North Africa, then Italy and France. He fought men and killed them out of reflex and fear. He liberated a concentration camp, a killer, opening the gates for the dead and the dying and those left with the image of death permanently imprinted on their soul. I was dying, no, had died. Returning to Houston, the man, no longer weak or afraid, found that most of his friends in that part of town were deceased. Renfro had been slaughtered by a jealous woman named Teresa, who in turn died from alcohol poisoning. Martin killed a white man and then shot himself in the burning shack where the boy had slept on the front porch. Minna Rogers, Delphine Monesque, Michael Michaels, Big Boy Saunders, and dozens of others all died while the boy-turned-man had survived the greatest war in history. Easy? There was a flood rising in the room that was swathed in darkness. My right ankle was shackled to the floor next to the bed, and the water was already up to my ears. I pulled against the chain, but all that did was cause me pain. My ankle hurt like a motherfucker, and the chain would not give. I tried to rise, hoping that I could float to the extent of the bond, that maybe I could keep my nose above water, but I knew somehow that my luck had run out, that death had come in on me while I was distracted by the mountains of evil I had lived through. Just the fact that I could survive such terror made me guilty. And now he was coming up through the floorboards like he did for my mother. Death. I had followed him through all the years of my life as he dropped bodies in my path as little reminders to me and others that the end of the road was no bed of roses, no kingdom come. It felt as if my whole life was an obstacle course, a slogging journey trying to catch up with death, trying to get a good look at his face. Easy. And then, up ahead, on my journey through a past life that no longer belonged to me, I saw his back. The Reaper was right there in front of me, carelessly firing a pistol into the night. I could reach out and touch his shoulder. When I did this, he grunted and turned around, and I realized that I knew this being, this deadly force that had dogged me from the earliest moments of my life. He was well dressed for any occasion or epoch, smiling with a gold tooth that had a diamond embedded in it. He was a colored man, not black but light-skinned and light-eyed, a brother who had littered the road I traveled with so many dead that even he had lost count. Easy. His lips didn't move, but I recognized my name, my true name, not the one that my dead father gave me. Raymond Alexander, known as Mouse to his victims and friends alike, smiled at me, and I shivered with pleasure and fear. "Ray," I said, and his smile slowly diminished. He stared at me and shook his head. I almost cried, but then I remembered who I was and what I had been through. "No, man," I said, you can't dismiss me like some school kid. You can't turn your back on me after all these years." He smiled again, and even though I was dead, I felt elation. This emotion was followed by a sense of falling again. There was a broad ocean rippling gently under a partial moon and the execution of a perfect accelerating arc of plummeting down. A shackle was affixed painfully to my right ankle, but impossibly, Mouse was still standing there in front of me, his expression daring me to do something about the fix I was in. "You expect me to fly, motherfucker?" I yelled. Mouse laughed without a sound and nodded to me. "Easy, wake up." The command was feminine, a nuisance that somehow carried weight. The panorama of my hallucinatory journey called to me. I wanted to go off with Mouse, to follow the long line of dead black folks, soldiers, and Jews. I wanted to join the people I killed and the ones I couldn't save. I wanted to shed my scarred and pain-riddled body. One more breath seemed like too much for me to bear. "Easy, it's time for you to wake up." I tried to open my eyes, but I was a child again, a slave to sleep, needing just 2 more minutes of rest. But a hand shook my shoulder and little legs came awake through my upper torso and down my spine. It was this pain that opened my eyes. I could see after a fashion, but my vision wasn't proper yet. I couldn't get a bead on the room I was in, but the beautiful Asian woman sitting beside me on the bed was clear and present as a Catholic priest preparing to give last rites. Instead of incense, there was a mild floral scent of perfume. "Lynn?" I said. My voice was hoarse and congested, cracking hard enough that I thought my throat might bleed. "I didn't think you were ever going to wake up easy," the Chinese bit-part TV actress claimed. "I died," I said. She almost responded and then moved to the chair next to the head of my bed. "I died, right?" I said, looking at the lovely Lynn Bois sitting in the off-white padded chair there next to me. She was wearing a slight and short maroon dress made from silk. She crossed her olive legs as if to say, "If you don't respond to this, you may very well be dead." "How are you feeling, Easy?" she asked. My vision was still playing tricks on me. I could see the young woman, but the room around her was blurred, without specific detail or spatial form. I I said. Lynn smiled and moved toward the edge of the boxy chair. Do you remember what happened? She asked. The question almost brought me to tears. I concentrated so hard that I began to tremble. Lynn took one of my cold hands and squeezed. It's okay, baby. You had an accident, Lynn said. She smiled. Her teeth were perfect. It was very bad, but you're pretty much all right. You've been coming in and out of consciousness for the last 2 months. Don't you remember? No. You will. Is this a hospital? No. The nondescript room behind Lynn got lighter, but I still couldn't make it out. Where? It's the house that Jewel McDonald got you when you were trying to protect your family. How did I get here, Lynn? What happened? I don't know the whole story, Easy. Tell me what you do know. The doctor said that when you came to and could talk, we should make sure that you stay calm. I'm calm. I need to know what happened. You were drunk, trying to pass a truck on Highway 1. So you're saying that if I'm not dead, I should be. Everybody thought you were, Lynn said. Ray got a call from your son at 4 in the morning. They found your license on the beach and the registration in the glove compartment of your car. It had crashed into the surf. And I was in the water too? Your body was lost. The driver's side door was torn off. The police told us that you had probably floated out on the tide. So what happened? I went up to the house with Raymond. Later in the morning, after Christmas Black came to watch the kids, Ray and I drove over to Mama Joe's. The image of the tall black witch woman came up into my mind's eye. Just the thought of her power and magnetism anchored my floating thoughts. What did Joe have to do with it? I was imagining some mystical rite where the witch had made a bargain with the devil to raise the dead. Ray told her that you had died and he wanted her to perform the funeral ceremony, especially since the body had been washed away. And did she agree? She looked Raymond in the eye and grabbed him by both shoulders, Lynn said, still astonished by the act. She even lifted him up on his toes, and all Ray did was stare back. After a minute or so, she let him go and stood up so tall that her head almost touched the roof of that cottage. And she said, your friend is not dead, Raymond. While you're here feeling sorry for yourself, he's out there in pain near death. Go back to where that accident happened and look for him, and look close. I drove him up to the place where you went off the cliff, and he climbed down. He was gone for 2 hours searching through the hillside and bushes between the big boulders and down along the beach. I just sat there and waited, thinking about how much Ray loved you and how sure Mama Joe was that you had survived. And then, after I knew that there was no hope, Raymond came up the side of that mountain with you slung across his back. You know, he's a small man, Ezekiel. You're almost twice his size, but he carried you halfway up that steep climb, brought you all the way to the car, and laid you in the back seat like you were a child. Where was I asked. Raymond said that when your car hit the first boulder, the door flew off and that you were probably thrown free. You fell into the thick bushes. They broke your fall, but they also hid you from view. I guess the police just figured that you were dead once they saw the car. You've been there for almost a day, and so were suffering from exposure as well as a bad concussion. There came a ripple in the atmosphere between me and Lynn. It felt as if an invisible wall had suddenly come down between us. She was still talking, but I could no longer make out the words. I wanted to know everything about my death, but I couldn't speak or even gesture. And Lynn was slowly moving backwards as if her chair was being drawn away by cables into the depths of the featureless room. As she moved off into the distance, the light lowered, and soon I was, once again, dead and dreaming. Thank you. I know it doesn't sound like a mystery, but you can't always do it. The next one, the crime starts in chapter 2. But that's the next one. Notes, thoughts, questions, minor criticisms? Yeah.
You read with a real velocity, if I say, almost like a radio announcer at points. But do you think that way? Do you think you write that way? Do you have a sense of high-speed direction when you're thinking these things out?
I don't know. I wish I could answer that question, but I don't know. I mean, I write every morning. I write pretty fast. Somebody asked me today, how many books do you write a year? And I said 4. And she said, And I said, yeah, 4. She said, how much do you write? I said, 3 hours a day. I guess that's a kind of velocity, huh? But it's like it's the It's the form of velocity. Inside, I don't know how I'm thinking. Yeah, yes.
As you write, do you ever vocalize dialogue?
Yeah, sure. Sometimes I used to, and every once in a while I still do. If I feel unsure about the book, I'll read it out loud into a tape recorder. Because that's, one day I'm going to be talking to some kid who goes, tape? What's that? You mean like a Band-Aid? Yeah.
So why did you start back up again? You said you were putting Easy to
Yeah,
sleep. So
yeah. Well, it was like I was kind of bored with Easy, and it's like, and I didn't want to write boring books. That didn't sound like any fun. Though I hear it's profitable. I just, and then, like I could. I said, wow, this is, and the thought, I think for about a couple of years I was thinking about bringing Easy back to life, how the whole notion of resurrection. This whole novel is a novel of resurrection, and that's what it's about. There's certainly crime. There's there's Evander, Little Green Noon, who went up to the Sunset Strip, called his mother, said, I met this nice white girl up here, and she said, you leave that white girl alone and come home. And he hangs up and he never comes home. And Mouse has something to do with Little Green. We're not clear what that is. The mother hates Mouse, but Mouse has hired Easy to find Little Green. And so that's the novel. You spend a lot of time on the Sunset Strip, and a place that I used to love to hang out in 1967 when this book is written. Covers and but yes.
Did you like the movie that was made?
That one, Blue Dress? Sure, loved it. It was great. It was a great movie. Really good. Carl Frank's a great director, great writer. Yes?
Are you going to be resurrecting Socrates?
Oh yeah, I'll be writing Socrates. Right now we're trying to do a television series with Lawrence Fishburne, with Socrates. But you never know what's going to happen on TV, so maybe we'll do it. And and I'll write another book. It takes about 6 or 7 years to get back to Sacco every time, because it's a whole other thing. The reason I came up with it is publishers are so funny. Years and years and years and years ago, I wrote the Socrates story, and and really publishers don't. America is the most capitalist country ever, and it's so much. It's more so than we recognize. And like the center, the heart, the soul of a capitalist country is the production line.
Yeah.
It's the production line. And everybody, and I mean everybody, is on the production line. There's no question about it. So when I go to my publisher, I say, I'm going to write a book about a philosopher, Socrates, they said, no, that's you write mysteries. You put the left front tire on the Pinto. Now you ask me, can you put in the rear view mirror? No, you can't do that. That's somebody else's job. You can need a whole new classification to put in the rear view mirror. That's 6 weeks of education. That's going to cost us $22,000. Et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I wrote the book, and they said, we're trying to say, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So what they did was they said, we're going to send you. Oh no, actually, this is before that. This is when I wrote an Easy Wrong song. We're going to send you to the South, and we're gonna have you do readings of Easy Wrongs in Southern Jewish book fairs. Because you're black and you're Jewish, and there's the South. And I said, okay. And one of the interesting things is that it's great to go to Jewish book fairs. One thing is everybody comes. Everybody's already read your book, which means they've already bought your book. So it's great. So you go there, and they all talk. There's always 3 ladies, and they're always sitting like over here. And the 3 ladies are like in their 60s or 70s, and they've read my biography, and they know I have a Jewish mother. And they say, where is the Jewish part of your book? And I would say to them, because Easy is reading Hadrian, I'm saying, my mother had a big impact on me, and that impact comes out of my books. And they said, no, we know what it is. The parts where Easy reads those hard books and talks about them, that's the Jewish part. And I would say to them, because there was the same 3 women, and that wasn't the same 3 women, but there was 3 women in every book fair. I went to 8 of them. And they would all say it, and I would say, black people think. But they knew who my mother was, so they weren't listening. When somebody knows your mother, they don't need to know you. And so I created Socrates. I created Socrates because I wanted to write a black philosopher that these women wouldn't claim. It's like, it's like, only my mother would claim it. She's the one Jewish person who's going to claim him. And so like, that's where he comes from. And he takes a long time because, I'm really following the original Socrates, this kind of development. And so it's, other thoughts, notions? Yes, sir?
In terms of the Easy Rollins series, what is your approach and how does it vary from, say, the Leonid McGill, series of mystery novels? I know they're in different settings, but
So how's Socrates different than Leonid? Is that what you
no,
said?
how is Leonid different from Easy?
From Easy. Oh, well, it's interesting. They're different characters, both of them pretty much orphaned early in life. One of them raised very seriously as a communist by an anarchist, right? See, the guy who confused, he thought he was a communist, but he wasn't. He was an anarchist, and he's raising his son as a communist, who gives up that and becomes a criminal because he's either the CP or the mafia, and so that's who he is. That's the easiest. But the difference is actually the world that they live in. In the world they live in, see, Easy lives in a world where his blackness shows up everywhere he goes. If he walks into a store and asks to buy something, if he puts a credit card down on the table, if he goes to a company where the head of the company has invited him to come in, somebody's going to stop him. Somebody's going to question him. He's always prepared. In this new novel I just wrote, he's driving down the street, and he and the woman had set up a story about what happens if the cops stop us. He put his pistol in the trunk in case the cops stop him, because he's always worried about that. Leonid's not worried about that. Leonid looks at racism as a halftime entertainment in a football game. The world he lives in is so vast, it's so broad, that yes, some people are worried about race, but those same people will suck Tupac Shakur's dick on the stage. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like it's a new world, that he lives in, and so race becomes a much less of an important issue to him. He doesn't have time to think about it, because he's doing a whole other kind of like thing. And so it's an interesting thing. It's much more contemporary. It's like I would say, in the 20th century, if I go to Detroit and a young black man comes up to me and I say, "How you doing, man?" He said, "Man, it's tough on our brother in Detroit." I would say, "I agree with you." In the 21st century, I go to Detroit and a young black man walks up to me and says, "How's it going?" He said, "Man, it's tough on a brother in Detroit." And I say, "I agree with you, brother, but there's some people in Kandahar be happy to do an apartment swap with us." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a much bigger world. And for me, we used to be, but now we're,
Yeah.
I talk to people from Eastern Russia and they say, "Shit, man, you should go to my prisons. You think it's bad for your people?
Yeah.
You come over here, I'll trade places with you in a minute. No prison. You're dead." And they're right. It's like, it's not even made up. Yes.
I was just gonna comment on, I'm struggling to write more,
Mm-hmm.
and as much as I like Chandler and Hammett, I couldn't really relate to them.
Mm-hmm.
When I started reading your work and sentences like, "I put on a skin-colored bandit,"
Mm-hmm.
skin colored if you were white, as you
Mhm.
said, and it just opened a whole new world for me. So it's just what you said, is those situations that Easy is in can be taken outside the U.S. and applied right now.
Oh,
He
yeah.
is a model for noir or tough guys all over.
Yeah, I think that I think though I never meant for that to be true. I think it is true the old noir books are great, but they can't help but to be brainwashed by the notion of the superiority of the white male. They can't help but to be brainwashed by it, and they can't help but to define everybody else as something less. And Easy runs into these people all the time. They come to, it's not that they hate him and they feel that they're bad people. They actually feel, how come you can't agree with me? I am your superior and I know better, right? And that's the world he has to face. And very often he has to face it in himself, because that world that they represent to him, he feels in himself. And the only person who doesn't feel it, of course, is Mouse. I don't even think Mouse pays any attention to Rick at all, you know. But which is a whole other thing, you know, when you see that character appear, a guy who, I don't care, man. So I kill him. The reason I realized that, you know, he became his main character is in the second book. Easy's having trouble with the tax guy, and Mouse says, "What's wrong?" He said, "Well, man, this tax man, he's on my ass. He's gonna put me in jail for tax evasion." He said, "Well, give me his name, man. I'll kill him." But they would just replace him with another man. I said, "I kill him too." And if they send another one, I burn down the whole fucking government building. You know, you want somebody on you. He doesn't care. He said, "They're white, they're black, they're big, they're short. There's 10 of them, there's 20 of them. It don't matter." He said, "You know, because you know, I'm me, and they aren't." Yes.
I want to follow that comment, Mr. Mosley, with the informative reality of your writing. I appreciate you so much. I grew up started, you know, in a all-white Jewish suburb, Newton Center, Massachusetts.
Oh, I know. I used to live in Newton Highlands.
I don't have the accent anymore, and then I was the first generation of busing.
Yeah.
And
That's
I just
bad.
want to, I have to tell you, I like to read, and your writing's great, but your work has informed my life about justice, equality, in ways that no other writer has. I drove a ways to be here. I want to tell you that. My son sitting next to me, we're huge fans of yours. You're really an amazing writer, and helped me understand a lot of things, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I used to live in Newton Highlands, next to that lake. What is it, Silver Lake?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a great place. Yeah, it was a respite from Boston. Wow, Boston was tough back then.
Boston was rough, yeah.
I remember I left Boston because in 1979, I was a black guy at the Shrap Candy Company, you know, and across the street from the Shrap Candy Company, Shrap Candy in Boston, so the street is Charlestown. Charlestown's back then Irish. Nobody. If you were Italian, they could smell it, and they would get you. A black guy on a Friday afternoon left Shrap's half a block into Charlestown to cash his check at a 7-Eleven, past a bar. There are a lot of bars in Charlestown. He passed a bar and cashed his check, came out, walked back, and the people ran out and killed him. Why? Because he was a black man walking in Charlestown, half a block into Charlestown. I moved to New York 3 months later. I said, nah. I know they keep that shit out in the boroughs in New York. So in Manhattan, at least I don't have to worry about that, you know. But it's gotten a lot better in Boston. But I remember being out there. Anything else? Yes.
I'm not exactly sure how to ask this question, but one of the things that I love about your characters is how well developed they are and how much about them, like you get so deep into who they are and like their unconscious that seems to come out. And I was struck when you read the scene about Lynn sitting next to Easy, like the imagination around that is just so compelling to me. And it seems to be in all of your books, that quality that is there.
But that sounds really nice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You know, I love my characters.
Yeah.
You know, and really, one of the things is that you know Jackson Blue in the beginning of the Easy novels. Easy doesn't really like Jackson, but he uses him. Jackson's really smart, and every once in a while he needs his thing. But as time has gone by, he realizes Jackson is one of his best friends, and he is one of his best friends because he knows him so well. It's not for any other reason. It's just I know this man so well. He has to be my friend. Like there's just no other way around this, you know. Either that or I'm gonna have to kill him, you know. And I think that, you know, and I feel like that about the characters, that you really, you know, you really want to know them, you want to get to know them better. I want to get to know them, you know. I enjoy how they live. You know, Lynn Bois, who was, you know, Mouse's girlfriend for a while, but now she's getting married, but Mouse doesn't mind because she comes and visits him every once in a while anyway. And, you know, there's a whole kind of, all these notions of this world that we live in, you know, that people deny. I just so funny, I was on you know, film. It was a documentary for Richard Pryor, and I was on the stage with Tracy Morgan and Jennifer Pryor, who is both his fourth and seventh wife. And we're talking about, you know, why Bill Cosby did or did not, you know, be in the documentary. She said, well, you know, one time we were having a dinner with Kaz and Camille. And, you know, they were so reserved. And there was this big $10,000 lamp that was shattered because Richard had lost his temper the night before and broke it. You know, Richard just got so mad. He said, well, let me tell the whole story. You know, we were having a three-way. And the girl and I were having a little bit too much fun, and Richard got mad. You know, and I was like, You know, it is a little bit too much information. But when you read a novel, that's the kind of information you want. You want the information of like, when we had dinner, it was very nice. He wore a tuxedo, she wore a nice, you know, Chanel dress. You know, I'm like, who cares? You know, some people do. You know, but I don't. You know, I'm more interested in that part of the story. I'm going to remember that part of the panel. Right. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment on, pretty much to piggyback on what she said about some of your characters. I was really struck by Ptolemy Gray, and the fact that, you know, he's very old, and it sounds like his life has spanned a lot of changes within the U.S. and that sort of thing. But his relationship to some of the younger people really stuck out for me. And also, I wonder if you agree with this. It seems to border on some science fiction, too.
Well, you know, you ever read 100 Years of Solitude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that border on science fiction?
Mystical realism.
You know what I mean? It's like,
Maybe science fiction is not the word, but
listen, let me tell you something. If you don't believe that there are rogue scientists in Bombay trying to figure out medicines to cure dementia, and that they're testing it on people who nobody cares about, if you don't believe that, I mean, that's science fiction. If you don't believe it.
I absolutely do believe it and have lived it.
Yeah.
My career was with in mental health, and
Yeah.
they tried out a lot of medications on veterans. I work with the veterans around,
Yeah,
so you know,
they
it's
try
a big
lots of
research.
Yeah.
Yeah, so of course.
So that's why I don't think that. I mean, I think that, you know, because I was very careful to say that he was an early dementia. He was just at that moment where his thoughts, if he spent long enough thinking in his head, like, I know I left it, I know I'm trying to remember something,
Yeah.
and I know that something has to do with money, and I know that something that has to do with money is somewhere in this room. Like he's at that level. He can't quite explain it to you. He can think it himself. You have to leave the room in order for him to think it. That's part. And so then to say, well, yes, this thing which, you know, does the electronic synapses not only in the brain but the rest of the body, which is why it kills him. You know, I'm just thinking, well, that's not too far out. It's not too far away from the world I'm living in. You know?
It's not. That's
Yeah.
why I thought it was kind of brilliant, as a matter of fact. I mean, he chose to go that way, and also it bought him some time, which was a real benefit for
Well,
him.
and the big thing for that novel is you can have 10 years in ever worsening dementia or 3 months with absolute clarity. Which one do you want? You know, and it's like, you know, it's like Flowers for Algernon, but it gives you the choice. You know, and you know, of course, then it's the love story between the 93-year-old man and the 17-year-old girl, which I just love to death. I mean, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to, but it's just,
I like that part.
it's just, you know, every time she said, if you were just 50 years older and I was 20, younger and I was just 20 years older, we'd be old enough to do something. That's right, but I'm 93 and you're 17, so put that clothes back on and cover up them legs. Thank you. Yes,
At the beginning, I thought you said that you write 3 hours
every day.
every day.
Yeah.
How much do you read?
How much do I read? That's an interesting question. Look, before I answer it, I want to ask you why you ask it.
I have an interest in writing, but I don't have the skill or background or anything else, so I'm just interested in writers and writing.
Huh.
Right now I'm reading Umberto Eco's Confessions of a Young Novelist. I don't know if you...
I know, I've never read that.
Yeah, anyway.
Is it very dense?
Well, almost anything by Eco.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
You know, the reading is an interesting topic, you know, because a lot, you know, most people in the modern world, my friend Mark is here, we are often argue about the modern world. Most people in the modern world have no idea what they're doing. Like they'll say to me, I read The Stranger by Albert Camus, and I will say, how many times? And they will say, once. And I'll say, no, you didn't read that book then. It's like, I'm sure most people in this room, they read a book once, and they say they've read it. Like, somebody worked on this book a really long time, and not only on that book, but the whole life of being a writer, developing sentences and metaphors and notions and ideas. And somebody thinks I could read that book once and get it. That's not possible. It's not possible. I don't care how smart you are. It's not possible. And one of the things is, even though I have many criticisms of university professors, one of the great things about them is they read books dozens of times. When you go through it, you see the different age of underlinings and notes, and because books are really, and I do a lot of rereading. I read books I love, I read again and again and again, and every time I read them, there's something else there. I go, wow, I see that now. Sometimes it's my age, but sometimes it's just reading again and again. So I don't read fast, and I don't read a lot of books, but when I do read something, I try to read it very closely and a lot. And I don't think it has anything to do with my writing. A lot of people think that writing and reading have something to do with each other, and I have never seen any connection at all between the two. It's like having sex and raising babies. They don't have anything to do with it. I don't care what you say. Yes.
You handle politicians quite well, and you hire the white power structure very well, particularly as to time periods.
Mm-hmm.
Like the 50s, emerging LA, changing LA after the war, Easy comes alive in that, and its confrontations essentially reveal not only corruption in the power structure, but weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely abnormal, right?
Right. Perversion.
Perverted, yeah, it's a better word, thank you. Is that a tone you try to set throughout? I mean, it seems to me you go into it now and then, but not as fully explicated as you did in the earlier Easy Rawlings. Is that correct, or am I missing things?
Well, and actually, I'm always confused, because the book I'm representing is always a year old. I just finished an Easy Rawlings where he's being hired by the police department, even though they're not telling him that, to find a guy that they've set up as a patsy because there's been a shootout between the police and some drug runners that they've been working with, and they need to find somebody else who killed them. So they're trying to do that. So that will happen now and again, because politics and the amorality of politics and the fact that we as citizens have to hold ourselves to a higher standards than our politicians, which is a statement that Easy makes in the new novel, which is the thing that I try to get to, but there's a lot of other stuff to get to too, like everyday stuff, existential stuff, children, that they're raising. And in the new book, Jackson Blue, because he's so rich now and he hangs out with such powerful people, women, especially black women from the hood, who knew him when he didn't have anything, are kind of after him. And one gets him, and his wife finds out about it. She has an affair with this other guy. She doesn't tell Jackson, but Jackson knows. She lets Jackson back in, and now the other guy is blackmailing her, and he wants Easy to do something for him, and so Easy and Jackson have a talk. He said, "Yeah, man, you see, like I had this affair, and she messed around with Percy, and now, and he said, well, but you already know. He can't really blackmail." I said, well, I can't tell her that I know. and he said, so why not? I said, because if I do, she's going to get all crazy. She might kick me out the house again. Which is true, right? and so it's left up to Easy to solve the problem because he can't do it. And there's a lot of different, so that's not politics, that's like kind of but we're going to all those different levels, trying to understand the life, because the reason I write about black life in Los Angeles is because very few people do. And, if you don't exist in the literature, you don't exist. Because nobody reads history books except historians, and history books usually get it wrong, Anyway.
I was thinking Raymond Chandler writes very well about many of the same subjects as one of the mystery writers.
No, he does. Yeah, it's just that he skips over the black neighborhood.
I understand that.
It's like what he talks about is great. Chandler's a wonderful writer. Hammett, I feel, is a better writer. Ross McDonald is better than either of them, I think. Yeah. But the truth is that there's in reading, the book obfuscates a world that, a Latino world, an Asian world, a black world, Native American world. I got a Native American hero in the new one called Redbird, and I just love it, and him and Easy have really good talks together. It's very nice. There's a question over here? Yeah, here, and then
One of the reasons I'm here is because I wanted to meet this person that could go from the Easy Rollins mystery series to Blue Light or The Man in the Basement.
Mhm.
It almost seems like you become a different author.
Yeah.
And I love the Easy Rollins. You know, your book is kind of like my go-to book whenever I'm traveling. I bring it with me, and you bring me comfort no matter what corner of the world I'm in. Love Easy Rollins.
Well, thank you.
Now, Man in the Basement.
Uh-huh.
That was intriguing.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to know what your inspiration was and what your message was, because I got something real special out of it.
Well, and what did you get?
I got the way we deal with racism. I got having to put on a certain face in certain audiences. I got living in two worlds. I got having to withhold rage, biding your time. I mean, I could go on and on. And I read it a while ago. I should reread it.
You know, the thing is, I was at a reading once, and somebody asked me, you know, people ask funny questions sometimes. They said, well, what do you think that every black man in America needs? And I said, well, I think every black man in America needs a white man locked up in his basement. Because, you know, we don't really know how this world works, and the white man does. You know, because he's the one who runs this world. So, you know, we go downstairs and say, listen, man, I've been working at that company for 17 years. I've done better work than anybody, and this new guy come in, he made him manager. And the white man would say, well, did you play golf with the boss? I said, man, we make ball bearings. What am I going to play golf for? I said, well, you see, if you don't know how to play golf, you're never going to get that promotion. You know, there's that kind of knowledge and information. You know, and I think Aniston Bennett understands how this world works. You know, and he needs to pass that information on, and then we need to pass judgment on whether or not we want to go that way. That becomes the whole thing for the Man in My Basement. You know, and it was a lot of fun. We're talking. There's a couple movies we're thinking about making. Anthony Mackie wants to do a Man in My Basement. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and we're trying to get that done. And also, Sam Jackson is making Last Days of Ptolemy Gray for HBO, which would be fun. And Gabriel Garcia Marquez's son is directing it. So, yeah. So that'll be a lot of fun. Yes, sir.
So, just a moment ago, you had mentioned Boston Dog.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, could it be that unlike Chandler Hammett, Kenneth Millar was a Canadian.
Uh-huh.
Kenneth Millar was an Oxford scholar. So in a way, he was an outsider looking
Well,
in.
Chandler's English, man. I don't know where he went to school. He's English. But anyway, go on. So he's an outsider.
Well, my point being, you know, maybe that's a perspective that he brought that was different than.
Oh, he's a genius, man. Those sentences he wrote. I read those sentences, I thought, God damn, he must have spent a week just to write that sentence. Because when you see some of these sentences, and they just like roll like one after another. You know, I mean, it's like when I was 17, I was reading this book. I remember when he said he was calm, like an adobe wall in moonlight. Oh my God! What? You can't say that. That's not possible. Yeah. It's like Bob Dylan writing novels. You know. Anything else? Did I answer all your questions? Yes.
What about Cornell Woolrich? Did you like him?
You know, I haven't read his work. I just haven't.
It's really good.
I've heard. You know, I stopped reading crime fiction because I found out one day that when I read a really good novel, 2 years later, the plot shows up in the book that I'm writing unconsciously. I was reading through one of my books and I just finished up about to turn it in, and I said, you know, there's something familiar about this book. And my other self said, well, yes, fool, you wrote it. And then I said, no, there's something different. There's something I didn't write. And I remembered a book I had read like 2 years before, and I had to change the whole book. So like I'm afraid to read mysteries. Yes.
You mentioned books that you love, so I'm just curious to know the ones that you love.
I read a lot of science fiction, so you know, like Arthur C. Clarke, The City and the Stars, Brian Aldiss, Hot House.
Yeah.
You know, Roger Zelazny, almost anything he ever wrote, because he's such a brilliant writer. Samuel Delany, no question, one of America's greatest living novelists who will never get recognized because he's a science fiction writer. I was once talking to Octavia Butler. She was saying that she had these next door neighbors, they were physicists, and they said, we hear you're a novelist, so I'll give you one of my books, you can take a look. And so she gave it to him. And a while later, she said, did you ever get to look at my book? She said, we saw science fiction, so we gave it to our children. It's like, it's like, that. But Marquez, I love. Nice and Youth, I think it's just, beautiful. I love T.S. Eliot's poetry. Even though I don't like the way he thinks. I like his poetry anyway. There's, really, there's a large, panorama of literary works in the world.
Yeah.
I like books, not writers, as a rule. Because some writers write bad books, but I like other books. Couple more questions, if there are any, and if not, I can stop. Yes.
Yes. You said that, and I'm sure rightly, that you should reread and reread books that you find speak to you. But there are so many books to read, and so my problem is that instead of rereading and rereading, I feel like I have to read, as many books as I can that are, because there's no end to good books, it seems.
Well, but there is a beginning. You know what I mean? It's like, I think the problem is that, it's like I had a friend once, he's a funny guy. He said, he was mad at this woman, and I said, why? It was a friend of ours, and I said, why are you mad? Because she's a lesbian. And I said, well, so? Didn't have anything to do with you, really? And he says, yes, but that means less women for me. And I said, this was a long time ago. I said, there's like 3 billion people in the world. That means 1.5 billion women. I said, if you just started right now, you couldn't get through 1% of that, 1/10 of 1% of that. I said, well, what do you know what I'm saying? It's like, yes, there's a lot of books in the world, but you don't have to read them all. Some of them are written in Greek, you can't read them, There's a lot of great literature that we can't read because they don't translate things into English. And, it's like, I think that I think you'd have a better time reading those books that you find most interesting at least 3 or 4 times, and just to test it out. And if you think I'm wrong, then you don't have to do it. Okay, and last question.
This is an add-on to your question. Is there a genre that you prefer writing? You are more comfortable with science fiction versus easy?
Yeah, I don't really think, genre is an interesting thing. Novels are novels, right? So, and plays are plays, screenplays are screenplays, poems are poems. It's the idea of the thing is I'm trying to say something. Like when I wrote Blue Light, I'm not religious in any way, but I believe there exists a soul. I can't help it. I believe it. I have no reason to believe it. I just believe it. And so I wanted to write a book in which I got down to the nub of a soul existing. And to try to do that in a mystery would just, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So I did it in writing this book of science fiction. When I look at things like Star Wars, and I realize that in the early ones there are no people of color, and the later ones they're all made fun of. I think, wow, I need to go into that area and to write a world in where I exist in the future. That's an important thing. I think it's like kind of a survival thing. And so, I'm writing about an old man who has dementia. I guess I could make it a mystery, but it's you can't concentrate on him. You have to concentrate on the plot of the mystery. So whatever I need to say, that's the way I write. Off the production line, which gets me in all kinds of trouble. I could be a lot richer if I just wrote easy wrongs one after another. But that's not what I'm going to do. Because if I really want to be rich, I go into real estate. That's the thing. Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming. I guess I'll
Thank you all so much for coming. This was very nice.